Thanks everybody for coming out too. I know it's your off season, like you said, but it's good to see the vested interests of the community coming out and participating. Again, we're here to talk to you today about past, present, and future changes along Florida's coast and how we see them accelerating in the near future. People come here to fish, swim, engage in business, and generally just enjoy Florida's nature coast. But I guess it's important to look at coastal changes in the past and how the changes that have occurred before and are projected to occur in the future may affect this and other communities like it. So I guess the first obvious question is, what does this mean to me? What are the impacts and what are we really talking about here? Well, I guess as Gail just mentioned, we are looking from the University of Florida through the Florida Sea Grant at the industrial, the infrastructure, and environmental impacts, or the impacts upon them that are projected, or at least could occur due to heightened sea level and average higher tide. There's things here in Cedar Key that could be affected, such as industry and tourism, or be it the oysters, which do need less salinity, or clams, which love salinity. That's an issue. And an important thing to consider too are the utilities, as we've seen, and we'll discuss later. But also, we're really out here to see what the community thinks about this. We want to know what's important to you, and if any of the things we bring up in this presentation resonate with you. So, I guess it's important to go over too what kind of change we're talking about. There are changes, sudden ones, like hurricanes, floods, and even laws, which can have a big impact on our coastal communities. And there are medium to slower changes, like saltwater intrusion into local wells, which has been an issue here recently, as well as coastal erosion. And it's these slow changes, like sea level rise, that bring in things like non-native plants, like mangroves and animals, along with saltwater intrusion that can really have an impact on these communities. So I guess we got to talk about the outline of our presentation. We are here to present you past, present, and future information on coastal change. Again, we want to get public feedback. We want to know what you're thinking about all this. And then thirdly, to just discuss it, to open the dialogue, to get the ball rolling on this topic. So.
All right, so going back to the past. Since 1910, changes in sea level rise have been recorded by the tide gauge station here in Cedar Key. This graph shows quite well the changes over the past 100 years. You'll notice the sharp peaks and valleys are yearly changes, monthly changes as well. And the general trend is one of increase. The increase is about 8 inches in mean sea level rise over the past 100 years. This next graph, created by the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, is a useful tool, I think, in visualizing sea level trends in the future. This graph shows tide level measurements from Key West, Florida in the past 30 years, this jagged line right here, and we project it forward based on historical rise rates out to the future. What I'd like to focus on is this orange cone of uncertainty, kind of similar to what they use in hurricane maps. So we're not exactly sure what path specifically that sea level rise will take in the future, but we know that it will be occurring at an accelerated rate. These two green lines represent a mid-range projection of about 1 foot of sea level rise in 40 years. I think this, when you compare it to the 8-inch increase that we had in the past 100 years, is quite dramatic, worth noting and planning for in the future.
Right, so I guess that leads us to where we are today. Of importance to the Chamber of Commerce, especially this meeting, is the significance of the economy and how it might be impacted. It's worth noting that many economic shifts have happened to Cedar Key over the years, beginning with the relocation of the community about 100 years ago after the storm of 1896, to the gillnet ban a couple of years back, to the recent saltwater intrusion to local wells. Change and transition in this community is just a part of life. While not related, those incidents I just mentioned, it does illustrate, again, this larger point that transitions are necessary. And also that we can learn from these changes. We can adapt, we can move forward, and doing so ahead of time, planning for them, helps minimize the costs and the potential, pain and discomfort of having to adapt to these changes. The issues I'd like to talk to you about, which could be made worse by sea level rise, include saltwater intrusion into local wells, habitat loss, and erosion and inundation caused by a higher mean tide. So I guess we'll start off with saltwater intrusion. Wells placed close to shore, as we've seen, have a higher chance or have a greater chance of being impacted by salinity. Now, the way that saltwater can get into our freshwater systems could be due to things like drought or higher uptake or other reasons. It really doesn't matter. What does matter is that these wells eventually get saltwater in them. Driving up here from Gainesville, we saw signs along the road, even in Bronson, about saltwater getting into their wells. So it's clearly an issue. And figure A to figure B shows this saltwater intrusion as it's made worse by sea level rise. Another thing to be considerate about is our local habitat. Seen here is an image of Wakasasa Bay, of a coastal hammock, which is this hardwood area of trees inside the marsh. And what's of concern here is that these areas are being replaced by marsh a little too quickly. As the sea level rises, at least at this rate, these plants their roots are just drying up. They're not able to migrate backwards towards land. You can see it here. A part of this hammock has already been turned into marsh. It's already dead. And these are things that, although they are natural processes, again, they're made worse by the elevated sea level. We can see, at least on the coast, how coastal forests migrate to the sea. You have your coastal forest that goes to your hammock, which is what this is again, which then turns into marsh, which then eventually gets swallowed by the sea. And this is a natural process, but it's happening so fast in a lot of places that the land and the trees just can't keep up. And these are really important. This is a really important habitat for plants and birds, as well as for the natural environment. And what would looking out on the bay be if there are no trees and only marsh? It just nearly wouldn't be as pretty. And the last issue we'll bring up here is erosion and flooding. Now, issues with water are naturally going to become more problematic as the sea level rises. It's just natural. Where am I here? It has a direct effect on water issues, especially here in coastal communities. The effects of erosion can be seen mostly after a large storm, but these large storms may come more frequently, and the damage by a higher tide could mean more sand and rocks eroding away. Again, this too is a natural process, but we need to plan for it because it's projected to occur much more quickly. And also, which we'll get into at the end of this presentation, are the economic impacts that a higher mean tide could have on the infrastructure. You got to think what's below your feet. If the sewers are underwater, if electricity is impacted, what does that mean for this community, tourism, the industries it contains?
All right, so moving on to the future, as Doug said. As the sea level rises, the Big Bend region will certainly be impacted. In this portion of the presentation, we want to discuss in more detail how Cedar Key specifically will be impacted. This map here is NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association's interactive sea level rise viewer. I think it's a great tool that allows you to visualize sea level rise for almost anywhere in Florida. So what I'd like to show here is we've moved this slider from the current sea level to 1 foot of sea level rise. This is what Cedar Key is projected to look like at 1 foot of sea level rise at high tide. As you can see, many of the outer islands would be in light blue, are inundated by flood water or tide water, and some of the coastal area around the main key is as well. This map here is I like because it's a more detailed view of what Cedar Key would look like. This is a 1/2 meter sea level rise, which is equivalent to about 1.5 feet sea level rise. As you can see, Highway 24 right here is definitely going to be impacted. Parts of it could be underwater as a result. Also, many of the roads and businesses and homes along the shore of the island will be impacted. At this point, Doug wants to talk a little more in detail about what's under our feet, what will be happening besides the changes you can see along the coast.
Right, well, okay, well, it all comes back to economy. This area can't run, can't function without its economy, and, I guess before we conclude, we should highlight some of the economic consequences that could occur. Consequences on the natural and built environment were just mentioned by Stephanie, but again, we should consider the capital investments of the area, the land, the buildings, the roads, and how they can be impacted by sea level rise. If we don't elevate our roads, or if or make provisions for the upgrading of buildings, they could be lost, they could be damaged, or at least devalued. Again, one thing that I keep coming back to is the effect on utilities. We've seen it here already with the upgrading of the reverse osmosis on the well. What does that mean for the next well? Where will it need to be in 50 or 60 years? You know, is plumbing and sewer going to be affected? How about electricity? You know, what impacts on other industries like tourism or clamming could be affected by a higher tide? While I am not qualified to really give that answer, we should really at least consider this. The whole point is to understand where this has happened and to plan for future eventualities. To begin this dialogue is really the point of our presentation. So, I guess in conclusion, we can see that coastal changes present many challenges to coastal communities along the nature coast. Some of these changes are sudden, like storms. Some of them are gradual, like sea level rise and saltwater inundation. And others, you know, some are noticeable but take a lifetime to see, evident in the dying of the coastal hammocks and the transition of landforms in our environment. But others, I guess, like sea level rise, are long-term. You may not see the effects in your lifetime, but they are real and they do affect this community. So I guess by understanding, you know, where we are vulnerable and planning for future eventualities, we can best minimize these long-term complications of our system and better preserve the communities and environments that we cherish.
So that concludes our presentation. At this point, we want to open it up to discussion. We want to hear from you guys. We want to know what exactly is important to you. What additional information do you want to know? What did we not share with you that you are curious about? We want to know. What specific changes do you expect in the infrastructure, environment, and economy of Cedar Key? And I'm really curious to know what you guys would do if you were to plan for sea level rise. What height would you consider? Would it be 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, something else? Or what time frame would you be looking at? So, let's bring it back to what's important to you. Yep.
Well, I have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
The map that you have with the orange,
No,
go back,
no,
we have it,
this
that
one.
one. Okay, when you say it's a 1/2 meter sea level rise, what does the orange significantly say? Is it just that it's become wet? Or is there a depth to what you have shown here on that? Do you know what that map means?
It's roughly 18 inches
Where the orange
change.
is 18 inches of water at high tide?
No, it's just,
At high
it's,
tide.
At high
It is
tide.
high tide.
Yes.
okay.
At high tide. Okay, so houses that are on stilts already are cool, and the rest of us are not cool. And,
If you can drive on your road, this,
well, I was looking at G Street's pretty toast. And Dock Street, of course, is elevated, and it could take 18 inches, and so could the restaurants out there. But then during a storm surge, it would not. But what I was also looking at is the Wakasasa Bay thing with the hammock. Okay, with the hammock.
Good.
The dead
Yes,
hammock,
yes.
right. The dead hammock. Wakasasa Bay has already got a lot of problems with oyster dying. Correct. So by those hammocks in Wakasasa Bay, if that's truly Wakasasa Bay, you may be impacting the kind of habitat necessary to provide the food product for the oysters, but then you also may have more salinity, which causes oysters to have more predators. So you're screwing with the imbalance, and I mean the balance of it. Now you're making it imbalance. And so, right now, clams require a lot of salt, so don't be fooled, and Bobby knows this, but don't be fooled into thinking we clam farmers would love more salt water, because that's not necessarily so, because the clams require a certain kind of food that's produced by this massive swampy area, and it may not produce that food anymore because it's changed. Not because it's a bad thing, but the alga or whatever may be changed. So you've changed that. You also have changed for like our tour people here and our tourism, where the birds may live and nest, and the whole thing is screwed up. It kind of really screws it up. So there is, you know, we aren't going to be able to stop it. So we really do have to figure out what we're gonna do and what it means. And it's very, very, very worrisome, and I'll be dead, so it's not a problem for me. But I'm very worried for my family and the decedents, or the people that live after me. When they had the hurricane that went over at Cedar Key, everybody just moved over here, and they didn't really think, except, well, we'll be safer over here. But we now have knowledge, and so we're required to try to think, to help. And it's very scary. It's very scary. Go back to that orange map. I think that showing people that
Yeah,
is the big key.
it is.
And if you want people to come out of the woodwork, you need to show that map and show what, and I wish we could populate and put the parcels and stuff, because it's very telling. I mean, that's really telling.
Do you have copies of that? Well, that's what I came to see.
This is what people came to
Was this.
We
see.
can get you
Right.
copies.
Yeah.
This is real, and, as far as our infrastructure, I wish the water department and sewer department came here. The water department seems fairly safe in their reverse osmosis plan, and even if their wells go south, and not literally south, but go, crap with salt water, this reverse osmosis has the capability of dealing with this, and I know that they are looking at siting of wells, but we could just kind of figure we're gonna do reverse osmosis. So thank God they're on the ball now with that. But as far as sewer, we already have here, all you guys, we've got here storm scepter, that's not sewer, that's stormwater. And stormwater fixes all around here, and they back up already. They back up already with just tide. And so the water comes back in, so, that's a problem. But our sewer pipes are all new, and they're all good. So you can put all the water you want in there, they're gonna be okay. Thank you, Jesus, this year we did that, so I think we got 50 years on that.
One of the questions I would have, Ms. Sue, is not so much the pipes that collect the sewage and take it to the plant, but what happens with the disposal system with the treated water?
That's okay, I think. I think we've got that kind of okay.
Okay.
We're up on the hill, the school hill, but we've been using a lot of our water as reclaimed water for
Okay.
watering. And so Cedar Key is really kind of, didn't know they were planning, but they've kind of got it on the ball.
Yeah.
They just haven't really, the citizens haven't all understood the whole complexity of it.
Right.
But I think we're okay with that.
But your stormwater and flooding,
The stormwater's kind of shot.
well, because when the
It's
sea
shot.
level rises, it will fill in some of the places
Yeah.
where you now collect stormwater.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, it's not collected, they're in these boxes. They just don't work when they're underwater.
Right.
I mean, they don't work.
exactly.
So we've got an issue with that, and that's something, they don't have a life of 50 years anyway, so we'll have to figure that in
Right.
as we go. I'm just looking at people's homes and some road problems, because as we said, G Street's, State Road 24, they'll build a highway like the pier. It won't be a problem. They'll just make it ridiculous and make it work. But our little streets, we got some problems there.
Right.
We got some problems.
I guess also,
Look at
also
airport.
noted here is
Well, your
the
airport,
are the
yeah.
islands. Those are mostly gone.
Say what
At
now?
18
Some of your
inches.
little islands.
Oh,
will-
yeah,
The
they're
barrier
gone.
islands, which protect you against storms, or at least provide you something to look at. Those turn into sandbars or oyster bars, I guess.
Yeah, and if that vegetation dies, then what is it for every so many feet